First topic. Guys, if you have any questions, if I'm going too fast, please do let me know, or if there's a lag or anything like that. Awesome. So first topic is Aperture. Now, Aperture is one of the key 3 tools within the exposure triangle. Now, the exposure triangle is made up of aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. In my opinion, and in the opinion of a lot of photographers, aperture is probably the most important within the exposure triangle, and we'll be focusing on that today. But please do remember that within manual photography, you have full control of the camera. So if you change your aperture, you really need to consider how that's going to impact the shutter speed and ISO. But we're going to leave that shutter speed and ISO for another lesson, another day. Today, we're focusing on aperture. Now, the way that you can consider the aperture to be is like the pupil in your eyes. So I always tell new photographers that cameras were designed to operate like your eyes. So regarding aperture, imagine you're in a really dark room. What do your pupils do? They become dilated. So that means that your pupils are actually trying to allow as much light into your eyes as possible so you can see better. They're trying to get as much information as possible so they can see better. When it's a sunny day and it's bright outside, your pupils actually narrow because obviously there's too much light around, so they need to allow less light into your eyes. The same works with aperture. If you want to allow more light into the camera, you have a wider aperture. If you want to allow less light into the camera, you actually need a more narrow aperture. I hope everyone's still with me. I know everyone's muted, so I'm just gonna say you're with me. All right, cool. So aperture impacts light, the light within the camera, the light of your photo, as well as the depth of field, right? So we've mentioned how it impacts light. The way we control the aperture is through a mechanism called the f-stop. Okay, I'm gonna show you where the f-stop is on your camera in 2 seconds, but this is more around the theory and the principles. So the lower the number of the f-stop, the wider your aperture is. So the lower the number, the wider your aperture is, right? The higher the number of the f-stop, the more narrow your aperture is, which means the darker your photo will be. If you're with all things equal. So the lower the number, the wider the aperture, the higher the number, the more narrow the aperture. Okay, cool. So if you might have your DSLR there. If you actually open up your camera and you look at the live view screen on your camera, you'll be able to see, so from this photo, you can see the M. The M stands for manual photography. And then if you look at the orange, so where it says 9.0, we can see that the photographer here is probably in a quite bright, so he's probably outside, it's probably a really sunny day, and he's actually got a 9.0 f-stop, which means that the lens is actually more narrow. The lens opening is more narrow. Okay, well, it's not going to be shut, it's going to be a bit more narrow. But we're going to exemplify this in this video. So if you notice here, at a 2.8 f-stop, you can see how wide the lens opening is, right? Allowing a lot of light into the camera, okay? But when we change the aperture down to a 5.6, we can see that it's actually narrowing. We're allowing less light into the camera. I hope everyone's with me. Okay. All right, awesome. Right, so we've talked about how aperture impacts light, yes? Now we're going to talk about how Aperture actually impacts the depth of field in your photo. And essentially what depth of field means is what's in focus from my camera. How far, what can we see in my camera? So for example, in the photo towards the left of us, of the woman that actually shot, I believe I shot this in Canary Wharf, we can see that we have a shallow depth of field. Why is it a shallow depth of field? Because the subject is near the camera, right? And she's in focus. So that's what you call a shallow depth of field. The way we get a shallow depth of field is by having a wider aperture. So if we go back to the f-stop, we would create this photo by using f-stop 1.4 or f-stop 2, a wider aperture. And what does that do? It also increases the light of the photograph. But not only increases the light of the photograph, but it also impacts the depth of field, meaning that the subject in this photo is in focus, but notice how the building in the back is out of focus. That's a shallow depth of field. If you wanted to get a deeper depth of field, when I was taking this photo, I would probably have shot maybe a 9.0, like exemplified in this photo here, right? Which would mean that the building in the background would be in focus, but the lovely woman would be out of focus. Now, tying that back into branding, why is that important in branding? It's important in branding because you can actually you can first get some absolutely stunning images. This effect here is called bokeh. That means blurry background. You guys might see it a lot with product shots, with models, for example, or headshots, professional headshots. That's how you achieve this, okay? Bokeh. Why that's so important is because it shows the audience what's important, okay? It shows the audience what's important. And that means that that subject is what's important in this photo. For example, let's say, so with enterprise business support, I know a lot of the students actually have fashion brands. Now, obviously the fashion industry is, you know, a very busy industry. So an idea for a photo, for example, to say that your brand is better or more quality than other brands, you could have a model that that has a shallow depth of field, right? So we're shooting the model with maybe a 1.4 aperture or a 2 aperture, for example, so that they're in focus with your clothes on, and then have loads of other models in the background with other brands' clothes on, and have them blurred, which shows to the audience what you're trying to tell the story to the audience is our clothes, our brand is better than other brands. When you're talking about branding, it's all about telling the story, telling your message to the audience, okay? I'm just gonna pause there for a second. Actually, no, let me just finish this slide and then we'll take some questions about Aperture, because I just wanna make sure that we're all on the same page here. So, for example, Essie, this is a shot that we did with Essie. She's a model that we work with quite often. We can see that this shot was a 1.4 aperture, right? Which we can see the bokeh here, which means the blurry background, yes? See, so it's a 1.4, so it had a wide aperture, okay? That means we had a low f-stop, 1.4, and a shallow depth of field, okay? This was actually shot by someone else on IAMedia, the Catalyst program. I can actually attend the shoot, but look how stunning the Catalyst cohort looks here. That wins me some brownie points with them, if any of them are joining on. So with this shot, we needed a narrow aperture, okay, which means a high f-stop. So this was probably shot with potentially a 9, a 16, f-stop 16 potentially. Why did we need that? Because there's a whole group in the photo and they're quite a distance from, so from the last person in the photo, right at the back, they're quite a distance from the camera, but we need them in focus. So we need a higher f-stop. So we have a deeper depth of field. Okay. Any questions about aperture, f-stops, anything like that?
Ooh, we do have one question that's come in, Imisi, on the aperture side. So it's, how is aperture different with zooming?
With zooming?
Zooming.
Okay, that's a really, really great question. So zooming actually enables you to, so how do I put this in a concise way? Okay. So zooming is different from aperture because, for example, let me just come out of this slide. Can you see my mouse? Can anyone see my mouse?
Yes, we can see your mouse.
All right, perfect. So let's say I wanted to zoom in to Sulu here, right? So if I just manipulated aperture, I couldn't do that. All I could do is make her in focus or out of focus, right? With controlling aperture. With zoom, if I had a zoom lens with my camera, I would actually be able to cut everyone else out of this photo and just focus on Sulu's head here. Does that make sense? So I could literally almost like crop people out. So the zoom would be like this. Does that make sense? So this is a zoom shot, but I haven't done anything to aperture here. Okay, so aperture, so zooming in lets us to literally zoom in onto our subject. It has no impact on the clarity of the shot, so what's in focus. Okay, does that answer your question? Anyone?
I think so.
Okay, I think we had some more questions come through.
The next question is, are there any iPhone apps that you would recommend that allow you to control aperture on the iPhone camera? I currently use Adobe Lightroom, but it doesn't have that feature.
Okay, so iPhone photography is a little bit different. I wouldn't say that I'm a specialist on iPhone photography. You might just have to do a little bit of research on that. Adobe Lightroom, again, you can blur things out within Adobe Lightroom. But again, that wouldn't be aperture. That would be post-production. So after you've done your photo, then how you edit it, you can blur, you can do effects on maybe Photoshop and Lightroom to actually blur out certain aspects of the photo to recreate the illusion of aperture. So, or to create the illusion of bokeh, which is here in this photo. But the thing about doing anything post-production, it has a more artificial effect. So I would always recommend that you learn how to really manipulate aperture within your DSLR digital camera. We're using the right lenses to create that effect, because the trained eye will be able to see that you've had to edit that in Lightroom, and it typically doesn't look that great compared to when you do it almost naturally just using the camera. But I'm loving these questions, by the way, guys. Really, really great questions. Keeping me on my toes.
Another very general one, Imisi.
Okay.
So if you have a camera, how do you locate the aperture? And they ask, especially for a Canon camera, generally, where would you find the aperture?
Awesome. So yeah, great question. So if you go to live view mode within your camera, so you can press it through. Can you see my cursor?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, so where that camera button is there, typically every digital camera is different from the different brands, from Nikon to Canon to Sony. But for Canon, typically, if you press the live view button, it could be here, sometimes it's down there on Canon cameras, you should see this mode, right? And through, so this page, and through the dials at the top of the camera, I'm sorry, I can't, because even within Canons, the settings are all a bit different. However, typically you should get to this screen, and then where you see the F button, so F 5.0, you should be able to turn it up or down. Okay, so
yeah, following
just,
up from that,
yeah.
actually, there is another person asked who asked, what does the F in f-stop mean?
Great question. Okay, so the F in f-stop means focal length, right? And remember that f-stop controls the aperture. So F means focal length, S means stop, right? So focal length, it depends on the length of your lens, for example. So for example, you might have a 50mm lens, or so the lens is at the top of your camera. So let me show you here. So there. So the lens, this lens, right? So it would say on when you're getting your lens, what type of lens it is. So it could be a 50mm lens, or a 35mm lens, right? And so, and the focal length would be 50mm or 35mm, and then it's divided by the stop. So it could be, so for example, excuse me. So for example, so f4, for example, which would mean focal length. Let's say I've got a 50mm lens, so it'll be 50mm lens divided by 4, and that sum would actually tell the camera how much of aperture you want on the camera. So the f-stop is actually a sum. It's an equation to give information to the camera about how much light you want in the camera for that particular shot.
That's amazing. Even I am very enlightened by this. So one more question before you move on?
Yeah, of course. Let's keep them going.
Okay. Is there a different type of camera that is specifically for Aperture, like one that is higher quality?
Okay, great question as well. So I would always recommend getting prime lenses. So a lot of people are focused on the camera that they get. Yes, cameras can differ between how powerful they are. For example, a Canon 5D Mark IV is more powerful than a 5D Mark III or II, for example. But what I would be more focused on is actually the type of lens that I get. Lenses, typically, the best lenses are typically more expensive than actual the camera bodies, okay? And for any beginner photographer, I'd always recommend you get the 50mm lens. That's the shots that can get you the really desired 1.4 apertures to really get you shots like this. If you get a 50mm lens on most cameras, you'll be able to basically recreate this photo, and that's a really great starting point. I remember I was in Hyde Park once with my camera. This is when I didn't know what I was doing. I was just taking random shots, and some random skater dude was like, "What are you doing? You don't know what you're doing." He got my camera and he taught me aperture in that afternoon, essentially. And he was like, the first thing he said was like, "When you get home, go on Amazon and get a 50mm lens. You'll get really stunning shots." So that's a really, really great lens to start with. And look for prime lenses. They're more expensive, but they give you a better finished product. Anyone else?
I think that's it for now. So
Okay.
if you want to move on for now. So if anyone has any questions, please do ask while Imisi is presenting. And when he is done, I think we'll have a Q&A section, I believe, right? So
Awesome. Guys, I'm loving these questions, but like, it's yes, this is yes, okay? I love this. Right. So we are discussing composition now. Excuse me. Let me just take some water. So, so yes, composition is, again, we're moving away from the exposure triangle now, okay? Now composition is literally, as it says on the screen, paying attention to what's being photographed, and how the objects and the subjects within the photograph relate to one another. So, rule of thirds, okay? This is beautiful. Rule of thirds. So I'm going to become a historian for a second. So in the Renaissance era, right, painters wanted to create a way that they could paint their subjects, but also see more of the landscape as well. Okay, so typically they would paint a photo and the subject would be in the middle of the frame. You couldn't really see much of the landscape at all. Okay, but then after a while they're like, this is pretty boring. We want to actually paint the background as well as the subject. So they used it in a way so they can frame their shot so you can see the background and also the subject. But then as this style evolved, they actually noticed that when they're using the frame, so if you see these lines, the horizontal and vertical lines, they noticed that if you actually put your subject on where one of these lines intersect, it made the photo more dynamic, okay? And it actually caught the eye of the audience more, because you can actually see how the subject relates to the background and everything else within the photo, rather than it being dead on in the center and you can't really see anything about it. It told a better story, okay? So it's all about making more dynamic and more desirable photos, okay? And these points of interest, when you're taking a photo and you're framing it, you should really look for these points of interest. Someone actually mentioned about iPhone photography. So if you actually look on your iPhone now and go on your iPhone, you might not have this actually listed on your iPhone, but if you actually go to, well, not just iPhone, but most cameras, most phones now, you should be able to see grid view. If anyone can see like these little grids, that is actually based off the rule of thirds. And to do that, to do the grid view, just go on your settings, go to camera, and then enable grid view. So even iPhones have followed this technique as well. It's really world renowned. But like with any rules are meant to be broken. So some photographers actually intentionally break the rule of thirds, again, trying to tell a story. Remember, so the rule of thirds makes your photo more dynamic, so you can actually tell a better story in terms of the framing. But also, if you want to break the rule of thirds for your creative genius, then break it, right? But once you start to understand these different techniques, that's when you can start become a critical thinker when it comes to photography. Because you can look at a photo and be like, oh, that photographer's broken the rule of thirds. I wonder why. Is he trying to make some crazy statement about the state of the world? I don't know. See, those type of statements, those type of questions, it can make you have more questions, for example. And then this, I believe Amanda's on the phone, on the call right now. This is actually a shoot that we did, I did with a couple of students 2 years ago, just for portfolio purposes. You can see that I've tried to frame the photo. Now imagine if the subject that's in focus was just dead in the center. We weren't shooting over Amanda's shoulder or anything like that. It would be a much more boring photograph, right? And even in videography, when you're framing your subject in videography, always, or not always, it depends again of your creative vision, but you can actually, you should, and you're doing an interview, you should try and put your subject into one of these intersecting lines. It makes it easier for the audience to understand what's going on. This shot in videography would actually be called an over-the-shoulder shot. Let's imagine Amanda was actually interviewing her. It just gives more information to the audience. And again, this is a shot that I did at Premier Gospel Radio Awards last year. Again, by putting the subjects, which the artists, on the intersecting lines, we can actually see a little bit more about the audience reaction. Again, if they were dead center in the photo, we would see less of the audience and it would be a much less engaging photo. Okay, so now we're talking about symmetry. Now, if you think about, again, remember when I said at the start that photography, especially how the camera works, we try and think about the eye. I always say the eyes are the best cameras in the world, right? And we have to really think about how our eyes and our brains process information, especially in the way it relates to the world. In the world, there's a lot of patterns and there's a lot of this symmetry naturally. And we look for patterns and symmetry and continuation within the world because it enables us to process information easier. Okay, we're always looking for patterns. Even philosophically, look at the circle of life, for example. There's symmetry in that as well. So that's why symmetry is so important. Okay, it creates visual balance. And there's 4 types of symmetry. There's vertical, which is side to side. There's horizontal, which is top to bottom. There's radial. So for example, imagine throwing a rock in some water and actually seeing the rippling effect of the water. That would be radial symmetry. And then there's reflective symmetry. So for example, yourself looking at the mirror, the reflection. So yeah, it's important. It's important in branding because again, it might make someone, because when you're considering your brand or the branding or your social media, for example, or your website, for example, you know that you only have a couple of seconds really to really capture that person, to make them maybe even pause on your photo. If you can show some symmetry, you're going to achieve that because it's easier on the eyes. They're like, it has a little bit more information about it. It has a little bit more je ne sais quoi about it. Okay. So for example, on the photo on the right, we can see that I've actually used horizontal and reflective symmetry there. People love that photo of mine, if I can say so myself. So this is another technique that you can actually use to compose your photo to again tell your story. I wish maybe we should have made this for retail or for sports, or because there's so brands are so diverse, for example. But really try and use this information and tailor it to your business and how you want your branding to be. Okay, boom. So we're gonna do a little bit of a workshop now. So I don't know if I'm essentially gonna put some photos up, and I need someone either in the comments or to switch their mic on to tell me the answer, to just really test our knowledge here. I'm just gonna do 2 photos because of time, and then we can do some questions. So this was from a photo, I believe a government campaign in Brazil. From this photo, from what we've spoken about today, what do we think, what techniques has the photographer used to convey his message? Okay, so I think I've got some comments.
So someone thirds.
Sorry?
Somebody is for rule of thirds.
Perfect. Okay.
We've got lights and the cars intersect in the rule of thirds.
Okay. I'm really, really proud. Okay. All right. Okay, I see quite a few comments. It's weird. Sometimes I can see the comments. Sometimes I can't see the comments. It's weird. I don't know why.
Okay. Happy to read them out for you.
Oh, were there any more?
So yeah, we've got a few more. We've got expressions, shallow depth of field, / aperture. And then we've got another one from Jessica who also says shallow depth of field as the background is blurred. And then Emmanuel, a lower focal length. So those are
I'm like a proud dad right now. You guys are brilliant. That's really, really, really great. That's really, really great. So yes, we have definitely got a wider aperture, so a lower f-stop, Emmanuel. Really well done on that. Because again, the subject is in focus and we've got the blurry background, the bokeh effect, okay? Secondly, we've got the rule of thirds, perfect. If you notice, this is so excellently placed on one of the intersecting lines. And it's so powerful because it actually almost exactly is actually framed where the fist and the face hits as well. Someone mentioned about lighting. Yes, lighting is not something that we actually mentioned, but really great spot there. This is much harsher lighting than what how a typical photo would be lit, and obviously trying to convey the emotion of, you know, harshness, of collision as well. So it's definitely much more harsher lighting in this photo. So guys, really brilliant there, really brilliant there. Okay, critically analyze this photo. So guys, what do we think the photographer's done here to, and what message is he trying to convey as well from what we've learned about?
Okay, so to in first with symmetry.
Who came in first? Sorry.
Toomey.
Okay, nice.
And we got
Right.
some more coming in here for the Manuel and Greta are voting for rule of thirds.
Okay, all right.
Barbara has observed maybe using everything that we've learned.
Okay, awesome. All right, guys. Really great suggestions here. Someone mentioned rule of thirds. I think it was a manual. I love to see you so engaged in manual. I haven't noticed rule of thirds here, personally, but maybe you could argue rule of thirds, or maybe you could argue that they've broken the rule of thirds in this photo. So I'm not sure where you're going with that angle, but rule of thirds is not something I would have actually highlighted within this photo. To me, that's a bit cheating, Tim, because I know you and you're part of IAMedia, but it's all good. But yeah, so she's got a spot on here. So we've got symmetry. So notice, so when I spoke about symmetry, again, we're trying to convey a message, and symmetry doesn't always have to be perfect symmetry. Sometimes it can show contrast as well. But because of the two doors, we have got symmetry here within this photo. And obviously he's trying to convey the message that, you know, you come in bigger and you leave slimmer. It's perfect. And you have to also remember that sometimes when you're branding and when you're taking photos for your brand, for example, let's say your ad is going to be in the underground, for example, or a flyer or something like that. Basically a medium that you only have a couple of seconds to quickly convey a message and get your point across. And I think this photo, because it's kind of an easy to look at, because it's not perfect symmetry, the image actually sticks in your head a bit longer. That makes sense. So sometimes you don't want things to be too rosy. You want to be memorable. And if you relate it to social media, you're competing against your audience's great nan that's had a 90th birthday. You're competing against your cousin who's got their second child. You're competing against your uncle's youngest son that just scored a hat trick on his debut. There's so much noise on social media. You need to really think about how I can stick out. How can I be different? Okay, quickly going on to Naomi. I feel bad for Obama. It's like he left office and no one cares about him anymore. Anyways, all right, cool. So quickly about Naomi. I don't know. Should we put it on the floor quickly?
I think so.
All right, guys. What from these two photos? What can we see from the queen that is Naomi Campbell?
I think absolute fierceness is what I'd say.
The slayness. Okay.
Okay, Nathan's coming in with shallow depth of field.
Beautiful. Yes.
We got symmetry from Jessica.
Hi, Jessica. Hi.
Jack, we got symmetry in her face. Jessica is all about her face, but I believe she means the symmetry in her face again.
Okay.
And then rule of third for the second picture. I imagine that's the one on the right of her turning her face from Jack. And then Greta, we've got symmetry and shallow depth of field, so a bit of both. And again, symmetry in her face from Clive. We're doing really well on this. Personality with lighting and focus is coming from Prince. And then Emmanuel, lower aperture, and as well as Annette, who says lower aperture. So how are we doing, Imisi?
Again, like, I'm not even a father anymore. I'm like a granddad that's like, I've eclipsed fatherhood. I'm so proud of you guys. Yeah, spot on. So, for example, in the photo towards to the left, remember how I mentioned about patterns and symmetry within life. We even have symmetry within our faces, and it's really exemplified in this photo with Naomi. So symmetry is the first one that comes. Yeah, there's a lot of other techniques, but again, because of time, that was the one that we were going for. And then on the right, I believe Jack and a couple of other people said that we've got the rule of thirds. So we can actually see it here. You can see how beautifully placed her eye is. That eye, you're just looking at it like, ooh, what you want. Like it's really well composed photo. So again, these are some techniques that you guys might want to use when you're taking photos for your businesses in the future. Okay.
Great.
So
I'm just conscious of time.
Time,
Hello.
yeah, hi.
So perfect time moving on there. For anybody that does have to leave at 2:45, please feel free to do so. But we're going to open up the floor to some questions now with Imisi until 3. So if you have the time, please do stay on with us, and I'll just let you wrap up, Imisi.
All right, perfect. Yeah, so I know we had quite a few questions earlier, but if you have any questions, just let me know, and I'll do my best.
How can we contact you?
How can we contact you? Oh, that's so nice of you. So that a bit ahead of me. So yeah, the website www.iamedia.co.uk. So if you're interested in photography lessons, videography lessons, or consultation about your brand in terms of advertising, then please do get in touch. Our email is there, info@iamedia.co.uk, or you can hit me up on my personal email, or personal business email, which is imisi.adefala at iamedia.co.uk as well. So lessons or consultation, please do let us know. Or if you've got an event coming up, we can cover that as well.
Cool. So some questions now?
Yeah, awesome. Okay, back.
Cool. So we have a personal question coming up as well, with a mixture of photography questions. Are you a self-taught photographer? What is appropriate starting point for somebody just starting?
Appropriate starting point. Am I self-taught? Yes, I am. I am self-taught, but with a lot of people like Nathan. So Nathan's one of my partners within IAMedia. He's based in New York. I believe he's on the line as well. I remember in my first job at Conversocial, we used to actually go out at lunchtime and just walk around, because I used to work in Oxford Circus, and just walk around Oxford Circus and make loads of mistakes. And he actually took me, I remember once we went to a drama show. For some reason, the actual word has gone out of my, but it was a drama experience. It was very, very dark. He was the main photographer, and he was like, come along, bring your camera. And again, I went there and made loads of mistakes. The way you become a good photographer is putting yourself in the fire and learning, okay? Make those mistakes because you can learn and improve. So get a cheap camera, stick a 50mm lens on it, or just use the kit lens. It's fine. Just go outside and take loads and loads of photos. That's the only way you're going to get better. So that's what I'd recommend.
Amazing. On to the next one. I think this is a follow-up from Emmanuel elaborating his question. So he's asking, when focusing the lens, it looks blurry initially, then gets bright after some time. What is the observation when taking the shot, essentially, he's asking.
Observation. So, you're meaning how do you focus a shot, I believe.
Yes, and when to take the picture when focusing a shot.
Okay, so when focusing the shot, it's literally when your eye can tell it's in focus. The focus is when when something's clear to you. So if you actually put your hand to your face, so look to a distance, right? Because remember, your eyes basically like a camera. It's the best camera you could ever have. So look into the distance, right? Now put your hand in front of your face, right? Now try and focus, literally try and look at your hand. Just notice how the background's blurred, but your hand is in focus, right? So that's how the camera works. So you should take that photo when it's clear, when what you want to photograph is clear, okay? I feel like that was a real bad boy example. I should get points for that. And can you guys still?
I did a little example on myself, even with
Yes.
and I can see what you mean.
Can you guys still see my screen? Sorry, just about
Yes,
focusing.
we can.
Okay,
Yeah.
so in the manual ring, there's 2 rings on a zoom lens. So I'm assuming you have a zoom lens. The one on the back. Let me see if I can make this a bit bigger. All right, cool. So the one on the back, this is for zooming, okay? So you're going in and out of your image to try and find the subject, right? To crop the photo down to what you want to photograph. The ring nearer to us now, so when I'm pointing at, this is the focus ring, okay? So you want to turn it. And again, it's just like your eyes works. When you turn it and you see it coming in focus, as soon as it's in focus, then you can snap. Then the photo is going to be in focus, okay? I hope that answers your question.
Perfect. I think we have a question for Katrina. So
Katrina, you're stealing my thunder. Can we skip that question?
So the question is, I don't have a camera. Can I hire one from Brooks?
Yes, that is a service that you have available to you at Brooks. It's called Brooks Hire, if you've not heard of it before. And they offer free loans of cameras, laptops, tripods, adapters for you. And it's some of it is on a weekly basis, but I know if you're working on a project that requires a camera or a tripod that you need to borrow for a week, you can just get in touch with Brooks Hire using their online portal. I'll pop the link in the chat in a second. And then you can take it out. All you need to bring along is your student card. And I know that even when I was a student, this was something that I definitely made the most of. And if you use these simple tips, it's really good to go out, get a friend, hire out a camera, and just take some really good pictures for your like LinkedIn or for your business. I remember doing some LinkedIn shots with a friend of mine. All of the campuses make beautiful kind of canvases and backdrops for those types of photos. I remember taking mine in the JHB library. So yeah, definitely make the most of that opportunity to take some photos around campus. I hope that answers your question. Just
amazing. Just a quick thing for anyone asking questions, please don't put it on the chat box because it's diluted. Ask in the Q&A section so that we can keep a track of it. I believe there is one individual who wants to ask a question. Please ask in the Q&A section. So we have another question coming up. This is redirected to Imisi. So Thunder's back in your, what's it called?
Thank you very much.
So the question is, how are you maintaining your creativity during lockdown? Is it hard to get out and get photos taken?
You know, the funny thing is, I actually don't have my my camera, or my studio here, because I actually came to isolate with a family member. Family member. Wow, she's on this call. My mum, during the lockdown, and I didn't actually have enough space to bring my equipment. So we're still getting requests for photography and for videography. But what's really nice is that we actually have in our collective people, so videographers that live in houses of actors, and have their own studios within their houses. So we can still, so I'm still directing. In fact, I directed an advert for Tubrooks. So this, so this brand actually on the Sunday, from the comfort of my home. So I was on FaceTime. I was telling them, no, we need this shot this way. So that's a way of engaging my brain. And I actually did a little photo shoot off my iPhone with my mum on Sunday as well. So because of work with Tubrooks and some of our other clients, I've not actually had a chance to really go back and just play around with stuff. It's all been very work heavy at the moment. But yeah, you can do so much with your iPhone, and editing as well. Because I've got thousands of photos. I can actually go back to Lightroom and re-edit photos, or edit videos as well. So we actually had a lot of editing to do for Brooks as well. So I don't know if that answers your questions because I'm still busy doing things. But as I do things, my creativity is still happening. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yes. Okay.
Actually, on the subject of work,
okay.
go ahead, dude.
No. You go ahead. I was just about to ask the next question.
Yeah, it's a good introduction to our next question. I was getting into that as well. So Emmanuel has asked, we'll want an opportunity to work with you. Guess that would be remotely.
Sorry, he wants an opportunity to work. Yeah, for sure. Like obviously with the lockdown, we've had to be very creative about how we work with our clients going forward. But again, it's not just me within this collective. We're based in London, Oxford, and New York as well. So we can still get creative and deliver what we need to deliver to you guys. So, get in touch and we will make it happen safely as well.
I think I have a question. This was asked by Becca, and I'm also really dying to get this question answered. This is absolute beginner stuff. So what would you recommend as a good beginner camera?
Okay.
Functionality and considering all the factors which you said, so we can start practicing.
Practicing, it depends on your budget, but just get a DSLR camera. Again, it will list on the camera, so DSLR, and just find a camera that's within your budget. All DSLR cameras, professional cameras, have the manual mode, so you'll be able to practice. You can get the cheapest one ever and just practice. But if you have a little bit more expensive, then get something a bit mid-range. If you want to shoot like 4K and things like that, look at like the 5D Mark IV. That's about $2,000. If you have maybe a smaller budget, maybe you want to look at the 80D. That would probably set you back maybe like 200, 300 pounds. And then you could get like a basic 50 millimeter lens for maybe an additional 100, 150 pounds. So yeah, it really depends on your budget, but yeah, any DSLR professional camera, they range from 100 to thousands of pounds. Just find one that's in your budget and go crazy, because all the settings, more or less, the main important ones, especially what we've talked about today about the exposure triangle, is in all those different cameras.
Amazing. Before I move on to the next question, there is a with zero background in photography, lots to take away for brand building and impact. Thank you. So that is Clara, before she left, she wants to
thank you so much. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Really
amazing.
Appreciate that.
And okay, we have some more questions coming in. Where do you get inspiration when coming up with new shots?
Where I get inspiration from? I get inspiration from other videographers, other photographers, my colleagues, my team. When I watch things now, I never actually properly watch things now. I watch how things are framed. I watch how the lighting they've used to tell a story. I just noticed in Breaking Bad, when they're in America, the lighting's actually really bright, but when they're in Mexico, it's tinted. And that's almost, even that subtle thing is actually telling you a story. A lot of American movies do that. These are the things I'm trying to reverse engineer. And then I'm plotting in my head, what client can we use that for? And yeah, I've got a lot of peers that I think are incredible. Delali, I don't know if he's in this call. He's not actually part of IAMedia, but he released something on Instagram a couple of days ago, and I was just like, wow. And I'm just like, how do I achieve that? So it's literally from everything I see. You can get inspiration from everything. You just have to have the eye for it. The only way you really have the eye for it is if you understand these techniques and you take the time to understand what is the rule of thirds. How do I manipulate aperture? How do I manipulate shutter speed? And what impact would that have on my video or my photo? Unless you know something, you don't know it. So that was deep. Someone better be clicking wherever you're watching this. That was. I'm very
Imisi, this whole session has been quite deep in terms of knowledge and also insight. So I think there's one more question that we have before we do the final sum up.
Okay.
I was wondering if I could get a lesson on glowing lights on the product. I think what they're trying to say is if you offer lessons and if you offer lessons on photography, lighting.
Yes, we do lessons of photography, and we also, if you guys are involved with any schools, we've actually done lessons with children as well, a couple of times now. So we can do lessons on photography, videography, digital marketing lessons. You just email myself. So Imisi Adefala or info@iamedia.co.uk. Let us know what you need, and we'll support you to achieve your goals.
Wonderful. So I think that was the last question.
Awesome.
So I just want to end by thanking you so much for a really interactive session today, and from all of the comments and questions that have come in throughout the session. I'm sure it's inspired everyone's creativity watching at home. And don't forget, when Brooks Hire opens again, perhaps it'd be a really good opportunity. Watch over this session, we have recorded it, and go out and have some practice on a camera, as Imisi said. If you do want to watch this episode or any other episodes, they will going to be live on our webpage shortly. So have a look out on brooks.ac.uk/enterprise, and give us a follow on social media as well. That would be great. Next week, we have coming up how to build resilience in terms of change. And this is going to be hosted by one of our alumni, actually, FA, who's the founder of Fearless Empowered. So I hope to see you tuned in next week, and Imisi included. And thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.